tell me how you got interested in this topic. What prompted you to start the research on a book like this?
Originally, I moved to Eugene in 1999 from Japan, a country known for very little violence. And it was a year after the Kip Kinkle shootings at Thurston High School in Springfield. And I kept running into people who had interfaced with that, a lawyer, a student who had been there in the cafeteria. And it seemed like more than coincidence. And I assumed somebody had written a book about it, but nobody had. And so I decided to research it and to write a book about the Thurston High shooting. But then I realized I couldn't write just about that shooting in isolation. Just like today's shooting is not really in isolation. It has overlaps to so many other shootings that have gone on. So I decided to make this book actually about all the school shootings that have ever occurred. And interestingly, from this week's point of view, while I was writing the book, there was also a number of shopping mall shootings. So they get into the book as well for the crossover. And also, I did a whole chapter on knifings where in countries where they don't have easy access to weapons like guns, places like China. There'd been 9 or 10 sequential, one after the other, month after month, knifings mostly in elementary school. And strangely, today there was another, the same day as the shooting in Connecticut. 22 children were knifed, none killed, but wounded in China, in Hunan province, on this very same day. It's a weird coincidence because we just had the shopping mall in Clackamas County as well. So it's sort of like, is it the season? Are people, you know, at the end of the year, are they acting out? But there are a lot of crossovers between all of these, and I can tell you a few.
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay. In the case of what just happened in Connecticut, we now have found out that this shooter, 20 years old, first killed his mother. Now, we know very well here in Eugene that, in Springfield, that is, that Kip Kinkle first killed his father and then his mother, and then went on to his school rampage, just as this shooter did. Strangely, the very first school shooting in America, 1966, August 1st, Charles Whitman at the Texas Tower at the university there. Before he did that shooting, he was a graduate student. He was in his early 20s. He first killed his mother, and then he killed his wife. Being a graduate student, he was married, and then went on his rampage. So what's that all about, where somebody kills someone very close to them and then kills people they don't even know? And in Kip's case, here in Springfield, what he said was, I killed my parents so that they wouldn't be embarrassed by what I was about to do. There's a logic in it if you're in that kind of a paranoid schizophrenic space where he was.
What has this week been like for you? I mean, watching what happened on Tuesday and then 4 days later to see something like this happen.
Yeah, you don't expect more things to happen, but unfortunately, when I wrote this book, I realized in doing the research that because sometimes of media coverage, it's not that copycats want to say that they're doing what somebody else did. They don't. They all think they're pretty original, and they're not. But things happen in clusters, and usually in geographic clusters or time clusters. So you'll find 5 or 6 incidents within a short space of time. And likewise, sometimes things we may not hear of. Here, some smaller incidents may take place, just a lockdown of some schools. There could be 3 or 4 of those in some other geographic area because it is local news, and this carries on. I don't think there's any way to get around that. People, certainly the news media doesn't glorify any of these things, and most of us will look at news like that and say, this is terrible. But there are those few somewhat twisted individuals who look at the same news and say, that's a good idea. I think I'll do that.
What do you hope people who buy your book and read your book take away from it? What's kind of the core that you want to be able to get out?
I understand. I've always believed that knowledge is power, And for people who are in a situation where they need to know what else has happened in order to prepare for what might happen, whether it's any kind of disaster that people are preparing for. It's better to know all the details of what's happened in multiple situations, and that's what the book is really about. It's quite detailed. It's over 300 pages long, and I try to cover every single school shooting incident that's ever occurred, but as I said, not only shooting incident, knifing incidents, and basically they fall into two categories. There's where a adult goes to a school, usually an elementary school, and they're killing kids that they don't know. They probably don't know anybody at the school, but they're doing it because they feel hurt, wounded, they're narcissistic, they blame society for hurting them, so they want to attack back and hit society where it's most vulnerable, at its weakest point, at its most innocent point. And nothing is more vulnerable and innocent than elementary school kids. The other type is when you have somebody with a grudge, like Kip Kinkle did, where he's not just blaming one or two students, but he's blaming the entire student body. And they go back to their own school where they know people, but they're not necessarily shooting the people that they know or that they wanted to get back at for some reason.
I had another question. Oh, what year did you publish?
This book actually came out in 2008, and there was an earlier book in 2006 called The Shooting Game that was really only about Kip Kinkle, and this was expanded, and it's rather strange how that happened, that it became a second book, and that was because there was a lockdown here in Eugene at Sheldon High School. Now, my daughter was a student there, and of course I heard on the radio there's been a lockdown. A boy was arrested with a loaded stolen handgun. He was 15, same age as Kip Kinkle, on the campus, on the school grounds. So I went down to the school and I talked with Mike Johnson, who is the vice principal there. And he told me that the school had been locked down in 23 seconds. I said, that's amazing. How did you do that? And he said, well, partly because of you. And I said, what are you talking about? You know, I had nothing to do with this except my daughter's here at the school. He said, no, I read your book 3 times, the earlier book. And I said, why would you read it 3 times? And he said, well, my uncle is Dick Doyle. Dick Doyle was the vice principal at Thurston High School in Springfield. And he was terribly traumatized by what happened there. And he swore that he would never let that happen again if he could do anything about it. He gave me so much information that informed my book. And when he got copies of the book, which I gave him, he then went and gave them to people close to him. Mike Johnson was his nephew, also by chance or purpose, a vice principal. And Mike had read the book. He said the first time just to read it, the second time to think about what he might do in those situations, and the third time was to actually put into place plans for lockdowns for a gun on campus. And before this incident occurred at Sheldon, teachers were saying to him, what, another practice? Do we have to do this? It's not going to happen here. And then when it did, people didn't say that anymore. So my hope with this book is that more school authorities, teachers, parents will read it and put pressure on to put drills like this into place. They have secret codes that go over the PA system so that even if the shooter is right there in the office, they have a way to warn people that there is something going on, a gun on the grounds of the school. And Mike Johnson himself had put together a plan that other schools could imitate, and there's a connection to that in the book as well.
I have to ask, as a parent, being in the news, we cover all of these things. I feel like I'm a little more paranoid than most parents are. Having done all this research, learning how random at times some of these crimes can be, what does that do to your style of parenting?
Well, it is random, and what we have to do is think of these, whether they're mall shootings, movie theater shootings, or school shootings, as acts of terror. And unfortunately, in this century, we've learned that these things can happen anytime, anywhere, unexpectedly. With my own daughter, as she was growing up and still in elementary school, we told her that, you know, there can be a gun that comes with somebody onto the place where you are, wherever that is. Don't stand in disbelief. Don't wonder if this is really happening. Bad things do happen, and, you know, don't walk around worried about it. Just be ready to hide, duck, take action, run away, whatever you have to do. And we also gave her a cell phone. I think all students should have their cell phones, which they're told not to use during school. But of course, in an emergency, they should be using it. Keep in touch with their parents, let them know what's going on. And of course, somebody ready to call 911 at any time. But still, although these incidents do grab headlines, they are so rare that they are not something, we can't live by fear. That's no way to live. But we should be prepared, just like you would be prepared for a fire at home or an earthquake in certain places, where you have a little kit ready and you know what you're going to do. And everybody in your household knows what they're going to do. With your kids, certainly people should have a plan that if something goes wrong, if there's a fire at the school, whatever, this is our meeting point. This is where we get together. Or call grandma if I'm not home or something like that.